Imagine someone who thinks they're the center of the universe, suddenly vanishing from your life without a word. You might think it's luck, but psychology shows it's something far more powerful. Today, you'll discover 7 subtle, science-backed strategies that make narcissists leave you alone fast, almost instantly. If you find yourself nodding right now, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to see how to reclaim their life from manipulation. Narcissists are experts at pushing limits. They test your patience, manipulate your emotions, and exploit gray areas to see how far they can get. What they cannot tolerate, however, is a wall of unwavering boundaries. Setting firm, consistent limits signals something they deeply fear: a loss of control. When you clearly define what you will and won't accept, they immediately encounter friction that challenges their sense of entitlement. Psychologists describe this as a threat to their narcissistic supply, their need to dominate, charm, or provoke others. A simple example is refusing to answer late-night manipulative calls or ignoring guilt-tripping messages. It's not about anger or revenge, it's about consistency. Every time you respond with calm firmness, you create a pattern that disrupts their usual game. Over time, this pattern teaches the narcissist that you are not a malleable target. They begin to redirect their energy elsewhere, seeking someone who will submit to their demands. Importantly, boundaries are more than just words. They are actions reinforced over time. It could mean declining invitations that compromise your well-being, limiting access to personal information, or saying no without apologies. The beauty of unwavering boundaries is that they are silent, yet undeniable. Narcissists, who thrive on bending others, perceive these boundaries as insurmountable. As a result, they retreat, not out of kindness, but out of self-preservation. In short, your boundaries act like an invisible force field, instantly making you less appealing to someone who feeds on manipulation. Emotional detachment is one of the fastest ways to make a narcissist lose interest because they thrive on your reactions. They crave drama, admiration, and the rush of controlling someone's emotional state. When you respond predictably with anger, frustration, or guilt, you're essentially feeding their sense of power. But when you remain calm, neutral, and composed, you deprive them of the very thing they live for: your emotional supply. This doesn't mean ignoring your own feelings or pretending nothing matters. It means observing their attempts at manipulation without letting them pull you into their storm. Narcissists are experts at reading emotional cues, and they quickly notice when you stop reacting the way they expect. Even small shifts, like not rising to baited comments, not engaging in arguments, or not providing validation for their exaggerations, signal that their influence over you has weakened. Psychologists explain that this creates cognitive dissonance for the narcissist. They expect a reaction, and when it doesn't come, it's uncomfortable, frustrating, and threatening to their sense of control. Over time, they start to perceive interaction with you as uninteresting or unproductive. Emotional detachment also works because it communicates independence. You are signaling that your emotional state isn't dependent on their approval or manipulation. For someone who relies on domination and exploitation, this is a red flag. They avoid challenges they can't manipulate. The more consistent your calm neutrality, the faster they disengage. What seems like coldness to an outsider is actually a strategic psychological defense that makes you untouchable to their control. By refusing to give them the emotional highs and lows they crave, you essentially remove yourself from their game entirely. Non-availability works like a magnet repellent for narcissists because they are drawn to people they can access and control. When you are fully engaged in your own life, focused on work, hobbies, relationships, or personal growth, you signal that you are not a convenient target. Narcissists thrive on attention and accessibility. The easier it is to reach you, the more they can insert themselves into your emotions and routines. By being consistently busy and setting clear limits on your availability, you reduce the opportunities for them to manipulate or provoke you. Psychologically, this taps into their fear of being ignored or losing influence. When they realize that their attempts to dominate your time, thoughts, or decisions are blocked, they experience frustration and uncertainty. This makes the interaction less rewarding for them, and over time, they tend to shift their focus to someone more reachable and compliant. Importantly, non-availability isn't about being rude or avoiding all interaction. It's about prioritizing your life in a way that communicates independence and self-respect. Even small actions like taking longer to respond to messages, declining unnecessary requests, or maintaining personal routines despite their presence reinforce this boundary. Narcissists perceive these signals as obstacles they cannot easily overcome, which triggers disengagement. By consistently demonstrating that your time and attention are not up for grabs, you effectively remove yourself from their pool of manipulable targets, making them leave on their own without confrontation. Confidence and self-respect act as an invisible shield against narcissists because they are fundamentally attracted to people they can dominate or manipulate. When you carry yourself with genuine self-assurance, knowing your worth, standing by your values, and refusing to apologize for asserting yourself, you communicate that you are not an easy target. Narcissists instinctively sense vulnerability or insecurity. These are the cracks they exploit to gain control. But confidence changes the entire dynamic. It's not about arrogance or trying to impress. It's about demonstrating that you value yourself enough to set limits and defend them. Psychologists note that narcissists are deterred by individuals who do not crave their validation because their usual tactics, flattery, intimidation, guilt-tripping, lose their power. Self-respect also means you do not tolerate mistreatment, manipulation, or belittlement. By calmly enforcing standards for how you are treated, you remove the reward structure that makes interacting with you worthwhile for a narcissist. Over time, they begin to perceive the cost of engagement as higher than the potential benefit. Every confident choice you make, speaking up, prioritizing your needs, and refusing to bend to pressure, signals that you're in control of your own life. This alone can be enough to make a narcissist back off quickly, often without realizing why. Essentially, confidence and self-respect are psychological repellent. They make you untouchable, uninteresting, and ultimately, someone a narcissist is unwilling to pursue further because their usual strategies no longer work. By cultivating these qualities, you take the power away from them without a single confrontation. Ignoring manipulation attempts is one of the most effective ways to make a narcissist disengage because their entire strategy relies on eliciting predictable reactions. Narcissists are skilled at testing limits. They may use guilt, anger, flattery, or provocation to pull you into their emotional orbit. Every reaction you give reinforces their sense of power and control, essentially rewarding their behavior. By refusing to respond in the way they expect, you break this cycle. Psychologists describe this as removing the narcissistic supply, the attention, admiration, or emotional drama they crave. When you stay silent, redirect the conversation, or calmly refuse to engage in their attempts to manipulate you, it creates a psychological disconnect that is deeply uncomfortable for them. They thrive on predictability and the illusion of control. Your non-reaction undermines both. Importantly, ignoring manipulation doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or becoming passive. It's a conscious, deliberate strategy. You are choosing not to participate in their game, which signals that you cannot be coerced, pressured, or controlled. Over time, this lack of feedback teaches the narcissist that interacting with you is unproductive and unrewarding. They begin to perceive the energy they invest as wasted and will often retreat to find someone more compliant. By consistently ignoring or calmly deflecting their manipulation attempts, you remove the psychological leverage they rely on, effectively making yourself untouchable. What seems like passive resistance is actually a powerful active defense that forces them to leave on their own because the dynamics they depend on no longer exist. Public accountability is a subtle but extremely powerful tool against narcissists because they fear exposure more than anything else. Narcissists thrive in environments where their actions and words go unchallenged. They rely on secrecy, manipulation, and the illusion of control. The moment their behavior risks being noticed or questioned by others, it threatens their carefully constructed image. Even small, discreet ways of holding them accountable publicly, without confrontation, can make them retreat quickly. Psychologists explain that narcissists are highly sensitive to reputation and social perception. They want admiration, not scrutiny. When they sense that someone might reveal their manipulative patterns, inconsistencies, or harmful behavior, it triggers anxiety and self-preservation instincts. This doesn't require broadcasting private matters or engaging in drama. It can be as simple as mentioning principles you follow, being firm in public settings, or subtly making their actions visible in ways they cannot control. The effect is immediate. Narcissists often withdraw, avoid, or stop trying to dominate because the risk of exposure outweighs any potential reward. Over time, consistent public accountability signals that their usual strategies, charm, lies, or intimidation, are ineffective. They begin to associate interactions with you as dangerous to their image, prompting disengagement. Essentially, when a narcissist realizes that their behavior is under observation and could have consequences, even indirectly, they instinctively pull back. By creating an environment where manipulation can't be hidden, You leverage their fear of reputation and social scrutiny, effectively making them leave without ever having to fight, argue, or confront them directly. Refusing to give validation is one of the fastest ways to make a narcissist lose interest because they depend entirely on external admiration to feel powerful and important. Narcissists are wired to crave attention, compliments, and approval. It fuels their sense of self-worth and keeps them engaged with the people around them. When you withhold validation, whether that's praise, agreement, or emotional affirmation, you effectively starve them of the supply they cannot generate internally. Psychologists describe this as depriving them of the reinforcement they need to maintain their inflated self-image. Importantly, this doesn't mean being rude or dismissive. It's about staying neutral, calm, and detached while refusing to feed their ego. Even small acts, like not responding to flattery, declining to praise their accomplishments, or avoiding over-engagement in their stories, communicate that your admiration isn't available on demand. Over time, narcissists perceive the interaction as unrewarding. They can no longer boost themselves at your expense or get the emotional payoff they expect. This lack of reinforcement creates discomfort and frustration, which often leads them to disengage entirely. Essentially, your refusal to validate their behavior signals that you are no longer a reliable source of their narcissistic supply. For someone whose relationships are transactional and self-centered, this is enough to make them retreat. By consistently maintaining this stance, you remove the leverage they rely on to stay in your life, making your presence less enticing and ultimately prompting them to leave on their own without confrontation or drama. Unpredictable responses frustrate narcissists because they rely on predictability to maintain control and manipulate outcomes. Their strategies are built around anticipating how you will react, whether it's guilt, anger, flattery, or submission, and then exploiting those reactions to their advantage. When your behavior becomes less predictable, it disrupts the game they are accustomed to playing. Psychologists explain that unpredictability creates cognitive dissonance for narcissists. They expect certain behaviors from you, and when those expectations are not met, it creates discomfort and uncertainty. This uncertainty threatens their sense of dominance and makes interaction less rewarding. Unpredictable responses don't mean being chaotic or reactive. It means deliberately varying your reactions in ways that are calm, measured, and intentional. For example, sometimes you might disengage completely, other times respond neutrally, and occasionally assert a firm boundary without drama. Each time they attempt to manipulate you and fail to get the predictable response, they experience frustration. Over time, the narcissist begins to associate interacting with you as confusing, risky, or unprofitable. Their usual tactics, provocation, flattery, intimidation, no longer work reliably, which undermines the control they seek. In essence, unpredictability makes you psychologically unmanageable for them. Unlike anger or confrontation, it subtly signals independence and self-possession, leaving them with little choice but to withdraw. By consistently incorporating this approach, you destabilize the patterns they rely on, making your presence unappealing and prompting them to leave without needing any direct conflict. It's a quiet but highly effective form of psychological leverage. By now, you can see the pattern. Narcissists are driven by control, attention, and the emotional reactions they can provoke. The strategies we've covered, unwavering boundaries, emotional detachment, non-availability, confidence, ignoring manipulation, public accountability, withholding validation, and unpredictability, aren't about revenge or punishment. They are about reclaiming your power and protecting your emotional space. Each one works because it directly attacks the mechanisms narcissists rely on to maintain influence over others. When you consistently apply these approaches, you shift the balance of power. You go from being a target of manipulation to someone who sets the terms of engagement. Narcissists, faced with someone who cannot be controlled, will inevitably retreat because the game they are used to playing is no longer profitable. What's remarkable is that this doesn't require confrontation, drama, or even confrontation. It's the psychological reality of their own self-interest. They leave when they can't dominate. The broader lesson is that your peace, self-respect, and boundaries are more powerful than any tactic they could use against you.